Hi, I'm Nancy McCaochan, and welcome to Living Karma Yoga, a program that brings you all the yoga world has to offer, from asana, which is posture, to breathing practices, pranayama, meditation, mudras, which are hand position, mantra, chanting to help you open your life, and lifestyle, Ayurveda, cooking, nutrition, shopping and travel, and so very, very much more to help you take your yoga off the mat and into your life, which is really where yoga belongs. The practices that we do on the mat are practices for our lives. And when we take yoga off the mat, we begin to live lives of joy and peace and happiness. And these are the lives that we all really truly deserve. And these are the lives that yoga promises that are deep down inside of ourselves. My guest today is Stephen Michael George, better known as Stevie G. Stevie became interested in yoga in the mid-1970s. He was one of a very handful of people at that time that was touched by this practice. After many years in business, he's returned to yoga as a personal discipline. He's also a really enthusiastic and gifted teacher, and he's here to tell us about his early experiences with yoga, as well as how this current practice and teaching is affecting his life. Welcome, Stevie.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. I'm really happy to have you here. Stevie's also a personal friend of mine, and so we might have a little bit of bantering going back and forth. So Stevie, can you tell me, or before we talk about your interest in yoga, can you give your audience a little bit of a background about yourself? That is, where you're from, what your career trajectory has been?
I'm from Detroit, Michigan.
Downtown?
Native. Yeah, actually I was born in Henry Ford Hospital right downtown.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And grew up in Detroit and then Birmingham, and went to Michigan State University. Mm-hmm. And that's where I started picking up some knowledge of yoga, actually. Mm-hmm. There was a small group there of, it was kind of like a social club, you might call it, or a yoga club, maybe, would be a better name for it. We used to meet at people's homes. And back then, the yoga wasn't physical yoga, you know, like poses, like warrior poses and that kind of thing. It was more of a meditational type practice. So we'd sit around like you and I are right now and play some groovy music or some soft, you know, something spiritual, and 33 1/3, of course, RPM records.
What year was this?
This would have been in the late 60s.
Okay, 33s were still relevant.
Oh yeah.
Okay, okay.
Oh yeah, the Beatles and Pink Floyd. You know, they had some really cool, as you know, spiritual type music. Really? Back.
So you meditated together?
Yeah, and then when I got out of college, in '69, the movie Woodstock came out.
Okay.
And the movie was made on it. As a matter of fact, I was on my way to Woodstock that year that it happened, and we got turned away, my friend and I, because the traffic got so big and the crowd got so big they wouldn't let anybody else come.
Oh, really? You got all the way to New York and got turned around?
Away like 10 miles outside of the area. They told us there's no room, you got to go. So anyway, but a few years later, a movie was made on Woodstock, and there's a segment in there on Kundalini yoga. A teacher had come in, and he was practicing with a group of the people in the audience, and that's what really caught my attention, because that to me was like, wow, what kind of yoga is that? Look at the breathing that they're doing, and the meditations and the intensity in their faces. And after I saw that, I started researching Kundalini yoga, but you know, it wasn't like we had the internet back then, and it was very difficult to find out any kind of information. And finally in Ann Arbor, I found a group that was into Kundalini a little bit. But after that, I was a big sports fan. I mean, not a fan, but myself, I was doing a lot of extreme sports, like mountain bike riding and water ski jumping, and I had a lot of injuries. And I found a book called Yoga Therapy, But it was yoga therapy for alcoholism, drug abuse, obesity,
Really?
and diabetes, and cancer,
Wow.
and back pain. And this book was just a little paperback. It couldn't have been more than maybe 200 pages. And I found that same book on Amazon just yesterday.
Oh, really?
I was looking, searching for it. It's been republished. But that was my first real introduction into yoga. It was actually yoga therapy.
Okay.
And I started practicing these exercises to alleviate my back pain and things like that. So, and I was just doing that at home. So that was the very beginnings of my yoga.
Okay. And how long did you do that?
Until about the mid-70s, and then I got married, and then I had 2 kids, and then I had this corporate job, and I drifted away from yoga for probably 20 years.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about your corporate job?
I worked for a very large dairy packaging company, and I worked my way up and became a manager of a production facility with 120 employees, and I was there for 35 years.
Wow.
And
Okay.
it was located in downtown Detroit, so I had to drive 35 miles every day commuting back and forth. And you know, I was in the ice cream business. Everybody used to say, "Oh my God, you're in the ice cream business. That must be fun." Well, it wasn't fun on a 95-degree middle of July day when the equipment broke down and there was ice cream leaking all over the plant onto
Right.
the floor. And you know, it was very stressful. It really was. So we got bought out by a big company, a national firm, and in 2007 they set me out to pasture. They retired me, and about 4 months later my friend said to me, "Why don't you come to yoga with us? We're going there tomorrow morning." And it was New Year's Day.
Whoa, cool.
So after all that time, 25 years, I finally went back to a yoga class, and that was the start of something new for me.
Okay, and so the start of something new, and then how did that progress from that one class? How is your journey
at that
taking
particular
you?
time, I had a lot of time on my hands, and in the very first class that I went to, I enjoyed it so much, I started going every day. Just like that. It was like somebody re-clicked this thing in my brain that said, "Steve, you're ready." You know, and you wait, you don't pay attention to something all your life, and then all of a sudden when you're reintroduced to something, you know, it kind of clicks in your mind.
Right.
And this is something I've been missing all these years, and so I became kind of fanatic about it. And not even a year later, I went to teacher training and got accredited at the Yoga Alliance, and I was started becoming a teacher at that time. So from there, I made the rounds of quite a few yoga studios and started getting a reputation and teaching quite a bit.
And you're also my insurance salesman, or my insurance agent.
Well, when
How
I
do you
lost
say
my
it?
job, I lost my health insurance. So I started researching for my wife and I how to get
Right.
health insurance, and I ended up making a career out of it. And I've been doing that for 11 years now, and I specialize in health insurance, health and
Okay.
Medicare and
Okay.
life insurance, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and so it seems to me like you've got yoga as health insurance, and then the traditional health insurance as well,
It was a nice
huh?
tie-in,
Yeah.
surprisingly.
And then why do you love yoga so much? What does it do for you?
Well, I was kind of always a mellow kind of guy, but when I
Really?
quit doing yoga,
I'm sorry.
when I quit doing yoga, I got into party mode.
Okay.
And I, even though I had 2 kids, you know, that was the disco days, first
Right.
of all. And traveling a lot, and I became a little bit overindulgent in my party practices, you might say. And finally I reached the point where I couldn't tolerate my habits, my bad habits anymore. And I started looking at my life, saying to myself, you know, you got to go on a different path here, because you're starting to get older, for one thing. My kids are growing up, and I needed a new direction in my life. I wasn't happy with what I was doing, you know, with my party mode.
Right.
So I started becoming more serious when I became a yoga teacher, and then I started becoming very serious about the yoga. And it actually helped to mellow me out. I became more focused in my mind. I started practicing, you know, breathing techniques and meditative practices that helped to settle me down. And I was able to overcome a lot of these bad habits that I had.
Okay, so they just dropped off, or you just clamped down on them and said, I'm not going to do that anymore?
It took it was slow.
Yeah, it is. Usually, if it sticks, it's going to be slow. It's going to stick, it's going to be slow.
Yeah, I mean, I was a big drinker, and I thought, you know what, I drink good wine, so I'm not an alcoholic.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, I know. I thought, well, if I drink fancy wines, then that means I'm not an alcoholic.
Right.
Well, it didn't matter what you're drinking, it's all
Right.
the same.
Right.
So that was one of my downfalls was alcohol. And
So
I was able to overcome that. I became a mellower person. I became more focused on the answers to the problems in my life instead of trying to just cover them up.
Right.
And yoga to me now is really more of a spiritual outcoming, I guess, because I think I've always had this in me. This, and I, because of my behavior, I was not seeing what I was really, truly all about.
Right. So how would you define spirit or spiritual when you say it's more of a spiritual practice? Because you still do a physical practice too.
Yeah.
But
Because, and especially what I've learned lately doing Kundalini yoga, is that it's all about, they talk about mind control.
Right.
By doing yoga and meditation and breathing techniques. And people always ask me, like, how does that work? What do you mean, mind control? And it's, if you do yoga consciously, there's so many different kinds of yoga, first of all. So it's hard to just pick one thing and say this is going to work. You have to kind of develop your own needs and likings over many years of practice to see what works best for you. But once you find the modality that fits your lifestyle and you start doing it consistently, then it begins to... Yogi Bhajan, who'd introduced Kundalini to America, he's been gone for quite a while now, but he always said that the breathing techniques in Kundalini, the breathing and the mantras and the mudras, which are hand motions, and when you incorporate those things together, it has an effect on the neurons of the brain. We have brain waves in there, and you can actually measure your brain waves with medical equipment. So when you get into the combination of the mantra, which is a chant of some kind in the back of your mind, the breathing techniques, and the mudras, which are hand motions, and to me that's the most effective combination that I've found for myself. Yogi Bhajan called it the combination permutation, which means that when you start repeating these mantras and the breath, and you get into kind of a trance, I call it a transcendental state, where your mind levels off, the brain waves become much calmer
and slower.
And he said that the neurons of the brain, when they line up together, they fire together.
Right.
And that mellows out the mind, it clears the consciousness, it allows, people say, well, you're enlightened. Well, yeah, actually, because you're allowing the positive impressions to come into your mind, and you're pushing out the negative. So your mind is so much more consistently operable on your own personal level. You can actually control, I believe.
Well, and it's not, the thing that interests me is we think of mind control as something that's clamping down, but it's not controlling like you're holding a wild animal.
Oh, yeah.
It's directing or consistent practice, as you said, the consistent practice. And I heard a quote or somebody say that the neurons that wire together fire together, the neurons that fire together wire together. So when we're working with those brainwave frequencies and our neurons are firing consistently in a very specific pattern, then that pattern becomes a habit. And that habit, that habitual firing of those neurons in that pattern, then it's not that it suppresses the other one, it's just the other one just atrophies. And so the bad habits, I mean, I used to be a smoker, and it's like lots of nicotine, but I don't crave that anymore because it's not part of my neural programming right now.
It's another thing that yoga does. It cuts out a lot of the cravings. And the other thing that I wanted to say is, especially in meditation, and I know you know this,
but our audience may
not. The longer you go in a meditation, it starts to develop these other deep attributes. For example, and I know you know this, you can meditate for 3 minutes and it affects your relaxation. If you go 7 minutes, it reaches another level where it even cleanses you even further. And if you go 62 minutes in meditations, they go all the way up to 2.5 hours, right? And 2.5 hours, most people would probably say, "Oh my God,
that's a long time.
How would you ever do that?" But you know, just the 7 minutes or 11 minutes is, it's like, would you go jogging for 5 minutes? No, you wouldn't, because it doesn't do you any good.
Right.
And you know, any kind of meditation is better than none at all. So 3 minutes is better than nothing. But when you start getting up into the 7-minute and 11-minute range, then you know that, I know there's an actual breakdown, you've probably seen it.
I have, it's in my manual, but you're wiring neurons to fire together in a very specific way that's helpful. So how has this changed maybe your relationships or any other aspects of your life? The yoga that you're doing, the teaching that you're doing. You obviously love to teach.
Yeah.
He comes in really fired up to teach.
Well, you know, I got a lot of friends in the yoga world, and I've pulled myself away from a lot of the old friends that I used to have that were leading me in the wrong direction, and I've even tried to change some of them a little bit, you know, and try to help them to give up some of their bad habits as well. But the reason I enjoy teaching so much is because the more I learn, the more I want to share it with other people. And hopefully I'm able to communicate that with my students, because I don't like to call them students. I'm not really a teacher so much as I am kind of a guide to try to just show them the path that I'm trying to go on. You know, maybe the stuff that I learn, I can pass it on, and then I learn more and I pass it on. Right. But I don't consider myself a teacher.
A little bit like a wilderness guide.
Yeah, kind of like a wilderness guide. That's exactly what it is.
You found a path and you're going to show somebody else.
And you never get to the end of the path, right?
Right.
One door opens and then there's another one that you have to open. But you know, you go deeper and deeper, and then I used to think that, when I first started Kundalini, for example, and doing some of these meditations, I used to go 3 minutes and I said, wow, that was a long time. I don't think I can go 7. There's no way I'll ever go 7. And that now I'm up to 30 or 31, you know, and it becomes easy. But it's the repetition, because you got to keep that concentration for a while. You can't just do it. You can't just meditate for 3 minutes then expect, you know, to have good results. You got to be committed to it. Right.
And daily. So you practice every day?
Yeah.
Okay. And then how many certifications do you have? How many different styles have you become certified in?
I got 3 certifications just in Hatha Yoga, and Ayurvedic and meditation were included in those classes quite a bit. And then I took a lot of training in yoga therapy through Karma Yoga and the teachers, including you. And Yin Yoga was another one. Yin is where you hold poses for a longer length of time, and you do a lot of releasing and surrendering to your emotions and your feelings. And then Kundalini, and 5 years ago I was accredited in Kundalini from the Sundara Institute in San Diego. And that became my primary.
You have a martial arts background too?
I have a little Tai Chi background and Jiu-Jitsu background.
Oh, okay.
And you know, that's interesting you asked that, because even in karate, they in Jiu-Jitsu they talk about the Dantian, which is the center of your core, center of your body, but it also relates to the bandhas in regular Hatha Yoga. The bandhas, or even in not just regular yoga, all yoga, the bandhas are your gates. That one of them is the navel center. That's similar to the Dantian in martial arts, and that's where the Kundalini energy sits dormant down in the root chakra and the bottom chakras. And then when we practice Kundalini, we raise that energy and bring it up into the higher chakras, and then it surrounds our auric field.
Right. I really love when there's cross-fertilization in one tradition and another tradition, and you can see similarities, or I mean, it's different language, but it's basically the same principle.
Yeah, it is.
I really like that a lot.
Yep. In Tai Chi, especially because you're moving energy with your hands, and it's very calm and soothing kind of a practice, but it's the same mentality as yoga or meditation, because it's actually a moving meditation. And then, I mean, they're using mudras in Tai Chi. We use them in Kundalini a lot, you know, hand motions. But even in Hatha Yoga, Gyan Mudra is very common. You see this in any kind of yoga practice all the time. And you know, the beauty of mudras is that it's a form, it's just like sign language.
Yeah.
It's a form of communication that we use to communicate with our inner energy body, and it connects to universal consciousness. So there is a lot of relationship between martial arts and yoga. And
the reason mudras work is because we have so many nerve endings in our fingertips.
Oh yeah, that's important.
Yeah, so and you all can try it at home, just to move your thumb tips to the various fingers, and just stay for a moment. Hands can be in the air, the hands can be on your legs, and if you close your eyes, sometimes you can feel different each time you touch a thumb to a different finger. So it's a slight, say, nuanced emotional difference, but that's really for me, it's the exciting part about it, is I can feel energy moving in my body. And then I have a question for you that might be a little bit...
Let me just say one more thing about mudras.
Sure.
You see blind people reading Braille with their fingertips, so we know that that's a sensitive part of our physical body, and we can really move energy with that way.
Have you ever been stung by a bee in your fingertips?
I have.
It's really, really excruciating.
Oh,
but
thanks for reminding me.
I forgot, and this might sound a little bit maybe politically incorrect, but you talked about leaving, having yoga, kind of releasing emotions. Being male, being a guy in yoga classes, feeling emotional, has that been strange, or how could you, I don't know what exactly my question is.
I've cried in a yoga class. If you get real deep into some of the sensations that come up and the feelings. And
did that feel, was it embarrassing to cry?
No, it wasn't embarrassing at all.
Okay.
I cry when I watch the Olympics and the girl wins the gold medal.
Okay.
I cry for her.
Okay.
I mean, I'm a macho guy, but I'm sensitive, I cry at the movies all the time.
You're a new age sensitive macho guy. Okay.
New age sensitive macho guy.
Okay. Well, it's been delightful talking to you, and we're just about out of time. I want to thank everybody at home for watching this episode, and we're here at the studio. Greg and Zach, is it?
Zachary.
Were gracious enough to come and film here. This is our home. We hope to see you here sometime, and if you'd like to know more about our schedule or the programs, go to www.karma-yoga.net. The light in me greets the light in every single one of you. Namaste.
Namaste.
May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surrounds